We're just going to start. So just start us off with what's your name, what's your organization, and what's your role?
Great. I'm Kara Kane, the Executive Director for the Fischoff National Chamber Music Association. We run each May the largest and nation's longest running chamber music competition. It's based on the campus of the University of Notre Dame, but this year will be our second virtual competition. We didn't think we'd be saying that again, but we've had about 7,400 musicians cross our stage. We both junior division as well as senior. We break them into winds and strings. So for those of you that don't know exactly what chamber music is, it's a group, an ensemble of 3 to 6 musicians, and they perform works that are of the classical sort of style per se. And then we also do a lot of outreach and education. Since 1995, when we've been tracking this, we've reached about 89,000 students in our tri-state area. And that's ranging from sort of K through 12. So we do elementary level outreach and education, and then to really ignite that spark in kids to get them to want to be music makers. And then we do more intensive education outreach with the music makers in junior high and high school.
Awesome. And so just to give a little bit more context, these are like the best classical music musicians at the collegiate and high school level in the world, nation. What are we looking at?
Well, I think, so we were always considered the National Chamber Music Association. So for example, last year we had applicants, 130 different applicants, and those were representing 27 nationalities across 24 states. We did actually reach 3 continents last year. In just looking at our applications this year, we had a really big uptick in international applicants, especially amongst our senior strings musicians. 60% of the applicants actually are international. And part of that is because the cost of coming here to be live at the competition is not an issue. And so, yes, well, amongst the juniors, these are phenomenal musicians. And actually we've had some as young as 10, 11, and 12 that are applying, and then all the way through high school. So there's that 18 and under bracket. And then the senior level is collegiate and higher. And so these are musicians that really are ready to launch a career in chamber music. And this is sort of the turnkey, I would say, competition that once you win the competition or even let in, I mean, the competition is super competitive. You are really discerning whether chamber music is a path you want to follow, because it is a little specialized.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And so, that's focusing sort of on the mission side. So let's zoom out a little bit. Generally speaking, can you give us a high-level overview? And you don't have to go into too many specifics, but how does your organization generally stay funded? Is it events? Is it grants, private donors, government funding? How do you guys operate?
Yeah, we're a decent mix. We do get some of our funding through grants. We also have a small endowment that gives us an annual interest dividend per year. But then our 3 biggest areas are a combination of individual donors, our board contributions. Our board is a really important component of helping us be funded. And then also corporate sponsorships. We do have a small sliver of revenue that we get in through our entry applications, but most of it is individual, corporate, and then grants.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And so then, as we've sort of gone through this wild last year, and we're just past the 1-year mark of the pandemic starting. Maybe just give us some insight as to what's been your organization's biggest challenge that you sort of faced during this time.
Yeah, Fischoff, this will be our 48th annual competition. So we've been around for a while, and my predecessors, Ann Devine, Pamela Rourke, and Mickey Serbley had a really great sort of codified methodology of how we do this, right? It was a well-oiled machine, being one of the best run competitions in the country. And then, we've served in over 175 schools, libraries, locally. So each year it was just, let's see who we reach out. But this year we've reinvented everything, right? So you've been thinking about, okay, how do we do this virtually? How do we still give the same experience and fulfill our mission? Our mission is inspiring lives through breathtaking performances. Okay, well, all of a sudden, how do you do that when you don't have that sort of spark and that connection and that live relationship? And so it's been really fun. We've found a lot of great silver linings. I mean, we've been able to tap into our full network of alumni, reaching out to them to sort of leverage their expertise as we were working through technical challenges, right? Of how do you just logistically bring this to people virtually? But then really adding that layer of what is the Fischoff experience. So it's been a challenge, but fun to really articulate and hone in on these are the pillars of who we are. And this is how, we're gonna continue to fulfill that, even though it's through a different medium. We've leveraged some of the sort of philosophical inspiration. This year it was by Beethoven. He has this great quote that says, "Art demands of us that we do not stand still." And so we said, okay, here's a guy who grappled with deafness and leveraged technology to hear, to express himself. So we're gonna harness that sort of entrepreneurial spirit, and we're gonna figure it out. I mean, the nice thing is about chamber music is it can be socially distanced. It can be, our musicians, it's much easier for them to figure this out to do safely than an orchestra.
Yeah.
Right? We've got just huge groups of people that are trying to make music together. So we've just really tried to stay focused on that mission and bring that experience through these new mediums.
Wonderful. And I think, so you kind of touched on something that I would like you to elaborate on just a little bit, because I think, Fischoff is so focused on, the event aspect or the performance aspect. And I think one of the things a lot of, at least we at GiveGrove hear a lot, is like, how do I even think about events or doing things virtually? And for you, that was sort of the apex, or that is the apex of the year, right? Is the competition and people getting together in person and performing and watching the performance and all of that. So what are some of the ways you guys have sort of traversed being a very event-driven organization during a pandemic?
Yeah, well, there sort of were three main events that we host, right? The competition in May. And so we still have been trying to focus on how do you give a live experience and how do you connect personally? And even though the performances were pre-recorded, last year we had virtual check-in rooms where we at least got to meet everybody. And so at one point we were on the line with three ensembles. Of the one ensemble was based out of Paris, but one was quarantining in Poland, one was in Salzburg, one was still in Paris. The other group that logged in was based out of Andover, Mass, but they were relocated to North Carolina, Andover, and Taipei. And then another group that was based out of Arizona. And so they all still got to meet each other and talk. And so this year, we're really trying to figure out ways to intersperse live elements. So we're gonna have a conversation with one of our jurors, Rachel Barton-Pine, who also runs a foundation of music by Black composers. So she's gonna give a live seminar, well, really conversation, and then play examples of music that she's uncovered over the past 20 years of great African-American and Black composers. So we're trying to figure out ways to infuse that into our program. Now, this fall, we completely reimagined our Double Gold Tour. So this is where our winners, the gold medal senior winner in the winds and strings division, comes back and they do main stage performances. Okay, so those were all canceled because nobody was doing main stage performances in person. And then what we usually do is spend a couple days in the schools working with junior high and high schoolers. Well, it kind of was like Gilligan's Island, right? It was supposed to be a 3-hour tour. And essentially we started planning in August. We had our first connects in October and they wrapped it up the end of February with the Boys and Girls Club here. And so they did 30 sessions in small classrooms, meeting anywhere with 20 to 40 kids to do master classes, to play for them, perform for them, talk about what it's like to be a professional musician, give them strategies on how to stay motivated in these times. And so it was really reimagining, what is a live performance? And then lastly, we had our gala, which is usually this amazing in-person performance with one of our groups. And so what we did is we still had groups there. And then the silver lining was, instead of just highlighting one, we brought 5 in. And we were able to talk to them, get to know them. We also brought in actually a classmate and friend of mine from undergrad who's an James Beard Award winning sommelier, who's been doing virtual events for MasterCard since the pandemic in March. And so she came in, and Stephanie Gallo from Gallo Wine helped us talk about one of their wines and gave a great auction item. And so we really tried to just stay focused on how do we give that experience to connect these folks. We sent gala boxes to 20 states. And so we really thought, how do we use this virtual advantage to go beyond what we typically have access here in town?
Excellent. Yeah, I love that. I love, you're not the first person I've talked to who's used the term entrepreneurial thinking. And I think that that's been sort of a huge trend for a lot of the organizations we've been seeing and working with. And I love that. I love the creativity that's coming from it. So, as you're, that's kind of like what you've been doing and what's been working, looking forward now for the next 12 to 18 months, there's a lot of sort of just questions floating out there. Is the end of the pandemic near? We've got vaccinations going on. We've got this heavy push towards trying to get people back together sometime this summer. What are you guys sort of thinking about? And what are you trying to focus on as these changes come up for the next 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, sure. So, for us, like a bunch of other organizations, you sort of have plans A, B, C, D, E, and F, and then know like, oh, well, we kind of have to remain nimble because we might have to go to plan Z, right? Yep. And it might be a week before, right? Yep. That we're like ready to go ahead. So I think that's been one thing that in chatting with my colleagues and peers is this idea of, oh man, you build it, then you rebuild it, and you rebuild it again. And so for us, it's really thinking about sustainability. And like I said, honing in on what is our mission and what can we do. And I would say the other thing we've been thinking a lot about are partnerships, because so many organizations, you sort of have a limited pot, right, of resources available. But then also I feel like, we've been rethinking the world order, right? And how we're engaging with communities and what communities we're engaging in. And so I think all of us are really focused on, how can we use our platform to do good? Small things like our Chamber Music Academy. So those are our local students here in high school that are working with professional chamber musicians, including the Euclid Quartet here based at IUSB. And so our concert, we're going to do outside. They're doing an end of year concert, and it's in conjunction with Music for Food Indiana, because we're like, you know what, we need to, as musicians, we need to be giving back as part of this community. And, for us this past year, it was articulating with corporates. I mean, we had corporate sponsors saying, we're focusing, we're allocating our funds on the greatest need, which is, insufficient food and medical things and health. And so we've been really trying to think about how music brings us together and to make sure that people realize it's not a luxury good. What we've seen amongst our musicians is just they've been so happy to connect, even if it's doing virtually, right, and piecing these things together through various apps. The fact that they're, have an instrument in their hand rather than like a video game console, nothing against video consoles. Those are needed too. A lot of our groups unwind that way, but just having, both of those and the fact that they're still collaborating. We've had groups that said, we're quarantining and we're doing e-learning so that we can quarantine and practice. And that's the highlight of our week together. So for us thinking forward is, one of our big programs that we reinitiated is our arts and education program. And so we have an amazing quartet that's going to be coming out, and we're reinstituting our stories and music program, where we take a book and they essentially will create a score that goes in line with that, because we know there's been just I mean, I've got a now fourth grader who never learned all his cursive letters last year because they just didn't get to it. And, you know, like reading. So we know that there's gaps in education. So we think this is going to be a great way to sort of reignite kids, level various learners by showing them how, you know, words can come to life in such different ways. So musically, dramatically. So we're really excited to be doing that as part of their tour in the fall.
Very cool. Very cool. So, you know, kind of the flip side of that question then is, you know, you've got what you guys are working on and what you're thinking about. You know, one of the things we're asking here is if you could sort of pose a question to anyone who might be listening to this, who's involved in the nonprofit space or mission-driven space, or, you know, is interested in this. Are there any questions you would ask others right now of how they're navigating or what they're doing?
Yeah, you know, and this is actually a question that was asked to me by one of our board members, John D'Souza of Cressy and Everett. He said, you know, we were forced in the real estate world to do a bunch of things that we wouldn't otherwise have done or would have taken us 3 or 4 years to do. But because you had to adapt, because you had to make this happen, you know, what is it that you're going to keep? What are the biggest takeaways that you said, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that this was accelerated? You know, because I think it's interesting for groups to acknowledge that we were pushed in a lot of ways to adapt. And I think it's really interesting to know what people are going to codify as part of what they do going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good one. All right. So fun question then. So what is your best tip for making the world a little bit brighter for either your team or those your organization serves during this time and works with? You know, any ideas or tips to just put out there to help folks? You know, I think it's always important to figure out ways to smile or brighten people's lives during this time. So you have any thoughts on that?
You know, we've been trying to get a little creative with poll questions during meetings just to make them not be so, I don't want to say boring, but we've had a lot of fun with sort of backdrops too. You know, like we celebrated a birthday party with hats, and so I think it's just trying to, and for us, we've also been using it as a sort of learning way of picking fun facts about our alums that you wouldn't necessarily know that they're doing all of these things. So, but that's an area I'm excited to hear what other people have to say, because I mean, the other thing is we just try to share the stories of our inspiring musicians. I'm sure a lot of you guys were inspired by Amanda Gorman's poetry on the inauguration day. And I tell people, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got dozens and dozens of Amanda Gormans that come to Fischoff every year and just blow us away by their sheer talent and creativity and just positive energy. It's so fun to watch.
Yeah, sometimes I think looking back at the mission or the reason you're doing it can be brightening in and of itself, and kind of getting back to that. I think that might be one of the positive things the pandemic has sort of forced out of our businesses, at least. But, you know, I think that's really cool.
And I will say one bright thing is one day, one of our team members like delivered McCree's to everybody's house. That was amazing. Not good for my waistline, which has already been awfully damaged throughout COVID-19. But even just infusing little secret things was a huge bright spot for us. Gotcha.
That's a good one. So as we're wrapping up here, Kara, can you just give me give me the best way for people to find you guys or donate or support your mission? Where can people find you?
Yeah, so at fischoff.org, it's spelled a little funny, Fischoff, is where we are. We've been really active on social media, sort of spreading the love of our alums and the music that they're sharing. And then tune in May 14th to 16th. You know, I recommend, while you're doing emails and stuff in the background, run our playlists. They are one of the best playlists that are out there. And then to know that these are, you know, amazing young artists out there that are doing this music. I think you'll be excited to hear that. So
awesome.
Fischoff.org is the place to be. We're on Instagram and Facebook very actively. And then we've got a YouTube channel.
Great. Thanks so much, Kara.
Thank you.
All right. And fade to black. There we go.